Hello, I'm Corey, and this is the 50-Minute Hour. Thank you for joining us today. We're joined by our friend Alexander, Jonathan, Seraphim, Calvin, and I thought you wanted to be called something different. Okay, so Hank. Okay. I'm just trying to get our pseudonyms right. Today, the topic is a much fan-requested furries. But before we get to that, I think Seraphim had some news articles he wanted to share.
Yeah, Calvin came up with this segment a few months ago, and we sort of dropped it. So let's try to bring it back. So I'm just going to read you a headline of news article, and then tell us what your initial thoughts are. An AI-generated artwork won first place at a state fair fine arts competition, and artists are pissed.
Mm-hmm.
What state?
I do not know. Actually, I guess I can figure that out.
When's the last time you've seen good art from an actual artist?
That's
true. Also, Colorado.
The painting, it's a series of 3 paintings. It's a space opera, and they're pretty interesting. And they're not bad. The other thing to consider is, like, with the AI the artist was using, he didn't just put in an input and get the output and that's what he used. He did this like hundreds and hundreds of times until he trained the AI to get what he was looking for, which kind of makes me think of how the evolution of art in general, it's like you're doing something with like mashed up paints and you're like, hitting rocks against something or whatever. Then you get like kind of brushy materials, and then eventually you get fine beaver hair or whatever. And so you're more and more refining the process, and the medium or the tool becomes less and less important, and it's more purely the artist's vision as the technology, in theory, of the actual tool progresses. So what's interesting with the AI thing is, like, it's almost purely just the artist's imagination without any tool, because the AI does all the dirty work. Of course, we're still not at the point where the AI is just reading the mind of the artist. That's all I really have to say.
I mean, I think that's a good point. I think that doesn't matter. It's they're still using a medium of the computer.
I don't want to say it doesn't matter. I'm just saying I think it's more complex than people at first shrug.
When's the last time we had a great artist? The Surrealist movement? It's been 100 years, at least.
Well, Andrew's
Chirico probably was one of the last great painters. In terms of, this is a controversial opinion, especially among, I think, the people that listen to this, and even to myself. The fact that I hold this opinion is shocking. I think that Rothko.
Oh my God!
Oh
my God!
I thought you didn't like Rothko.
I hate Rothko. No, I didn't say it. I didn't say anything about Rothko yet. I hate Rothko.
But he's a great painter.
I think that Rothko was one of the last painters that had spirit behind him.
You should see my child paint.
Yeah, your child probably is at the same level as Rothko. But Rothko and your child are better than most of these so-called painters, artists nowadays, because you'll see like these people who make digital art. Like, I hate digital art. I hate people that do the computer art shit where it looks technically really, really good, right? But there's literally nothing behind it.
Mm-hmm.
What I like about Rothko is that it's very honestly bad art. But at the very least, I can call it bad.
You can have a spiritual experience.
I can call it bad. I don't think it's actually spiritual. I'm
saying you can have a spiritual experience with it.
With Rothko?
Yeah, if you stand close enough, I think. In person.
Who was that dipshit that the mentally retarded guy?
Henry Darcher?
No, the one that threw paint everywhere.
Pollock?
Yeah, it's the same with Pollock. Like,
I don't think you can have a spiritual experience with Pollock.
I think that Rothko is a little bit.
But you like Pollock, don't you?
No, I hate Pollock.
Okay.
I genuinely.
Oh, your friend likes Pollock.
Pollock's dead, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, he died a while ago.
Good. That's good.
I think there's something in Pollock.
That's good to hear.
No, I've seen his stuff in person. People say it's more impressive in person. No. I didn't think it was any better.
It's like Picasso. I used to be a big Picasso fan. Then I saw him in person. I hate him. Hate him so much.
No, I like Picasso.
Garbage, trash.
But in either case, I think, Jonathan, your point is that, our heroes are dead. Maybe AI should take the mantle up.
Sure.
I think thing that makes AI art really bad is kind of the problem with I forget the name of the essay by Heidegger, but he's talking about, and it's I think Spengler also talks about this.
Question concerning technology.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, where he talks about how one of the main issues of technology is not necessarily technology itself, but sort of um, that gap between man and technology, which is kind of filled by understanding of the tool. And the problem with AI generated art and these procedurally generated things is that no matter how much textual effort we can kind of put into this new medium, we can't actually come to an understanding of it because the way that these robots are made are through these programmers that are or really teams of programmers that come together and kind of have like all together like a combined IQ of like 1,000, and the ability for us to actually understand how the art's being made is just not there. And I think that that is a problem when it comes to
Mhm.
making art, because a
Yeah.
good craftsman, a good artist knows his tool, like his tool is an extension of him. But I don't think that AI generated art the artist can have the bot or whatever they're using as a extension of themselves. I just don't think it's possible.
What you're saying reminds me of the Renaissance painters who are insistent on painting with one hair brushes.
Yeah.
It's almost like the very struggle of the tool is
Yeah.
what produces the greatness of the
Right.
art, which is eliminated more or less in AI generated art.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty much gone. And I'm not to say that effort equals good, right?
Mhm.
Because there are people like the Chirico, which he would make a painting that's a great painting within like 30 minutes and sell it for 10 grand. And it's kind of like the biggest troll, but he's an excellent painter.
Mhm.
And he also is a true master. But I just don't think that.
And there are painters who struggle intensely and put so much work into their art, but it's still shit.
Yeah, it's garbage.
Yeah.
Absolute garbage.
So it's not that in and of itself,
Yeah.
but it probably helps someone already great make something greater.
Yeah, Bojero, one of those people I'm thinking of. Like all of these, like when someone thinks of like traditional art that knows nothing about tradition or art, these like 19th century hacks are the people that I would say put a ton of effort into their work, and it's all shit, garbage.
Should we move on to the next
Did
one
anyone
here?
have any other comments? No.
So closely following on art is ads. So this will be our next headline, which is Nigeria becomes the first country to ban white models in adverts.
Yeah, I think this is awesome. I think I my initial response to this was if only all countries could ban modeling of soil or modeling of blood not from the soil. Of course, this gets confusing with questions like America. What would that mean?
I was going to say, like, that's the
Is it just
obvious-
Native Americans we put on there? But
They didn't build America.
no, but you know what I mean. Like, what does it mean for blood to come from the soil? Like, you till the corn, you till the soil, and that becomes your nation, right?
Were they? I don't think they were agricultural either.
They were a little out. Not in
No,
the.
they didn't
Not in
believe in
the.
it. They believe that if you agriculture, if you tame the
Yeah.
land so much it became sand. That's what happened
Yeah.
to Egypt and Israel and all that. That's what.
Well, I think they're right, but I mean,
Yeah.
I guess in the sense like they were planting seeds and growing stuff to eat. Were they not?
I think they primarily hunted, just like the
Oh,
Germans.
okay.
It's
Yeah.
the corn.
Well, I would say, yeah, the corn. I would say even the case of hunting still, but
But I think still it's the society of America we have now is very much not the society of, the indigenous Americans. So I think Jonathan's point still stands that
Yeah.
they're not really the ones that have built this culture.
with industrialism, the whole thing becomes removed because it's no longer people are produced by soil and industrialism.
Well, and I think the problem with America is like, okay, it's like, I guess you could do like English, British, and then like Dutch and like some French, but it's like, do we ban Irish people from?
Yes.
It's like, at what point do you stop saying,
are there any Irish models? Is that a thing?
No, but yeah, there are, of course. But I'm like, it's like, how far back do we want to go where we say this is the American lineage? It's very hard.
It's really cut and dry. Old stock American was pretty much consistent up until like the Ellis Island years
yeah.
in the 20th century. Like the Scandinavians were okay, Germans were tolerated.
Not the Irish, not the Italians.
The Irish are no. the Scots Irish, like Northern Irish, were fine, but like the Irish,
Protestant Irish.
yeah, the Protestant, the Catholic Irish.
So Protestant white people can be models in
It
America,
would basically be Dutch and Englishmen who are like not very good looking.
just like
people,
Protestant ugly chads.
Yeah, would be American models.
Okay, well that problem's solved.
Yeah, no, it's cut and dry.
So we just have to wait for other nations to progressively adapt. What was it? Libya? What was this country we're dealing with? Nigeria. There we go. Are there any other comments?
And now
There's a really interesting YouTube channel, really small that I happened to find. I think Nigeria is a very interesting place. It's very funny. There was a YouTube channel I found. It's like a small music group, probably only 100, 200 followers from Nigeria, and it was called Hitler TV. I wonder why they chose this name. It's beyond me. You can go to many places in the third world and find this obsession with Hitler.
Many such places.
Yeah, Pakistan's one of them. You can buy cigarettes called Hitler cigarettes in Pakistan.
I know it's a big thing in Mongolia
and
too.
Egypt has like these small stores that are Hitler themed. Why?
Yeah.
What's going on?
it's like us with like Augustus Caesar. He's just like
it's
another
just like, wow, this guy's fucking seems
mythical.
This guy seems crazy.
Augustus ain't shit compared to his adopted father.
Yeah, true.
Julius is the
guy. I always
Julius
heard
is the guy.
I always
yeah.
heard Julius was the virgin and
Augustus was a good statesman, but Julius like
was a
Dang.
conqueror.
yeah, he fucked shit up. Dude.
I've been lied to.
He fucked shit up. But I think that Nigeria, notes aside, I think it's a very fascinating country. I'd like to see where this goes.
Have you all seen the most popular music through a lot of African rural parts? It's hilarious. It's American country.
Really?
Stone Age herbalists.
I've seen like Mormon
Really?
stuff,
Yeah,
but not.
They're huge into like country western themes. Well, think about
Okay.
it. They're gonna have
Yeah.
a lot more to relate to in
Yeah.
American
Yeah.
country music than they would hip hop because they're out there on the farm with animals and big trucks and all that stuff.
Indians like country too.
They're LARPing.
I think they are. I don't know.
Well, without further ado, do we want to get into
Move on to
Yeah,
furries.
the main
Okay.
part of this podcast?
So
the furry
for those
cast?
fortunate who are not familiar with the phenomenon of the furry, it's basically people who dress up in fursuits or they have a fursona.
They identify.
They identify as their
animals.
fursona, and it might be on and off like a transvestite, or it might be a permanent thing like a what's the other, a transgender person or whatever. But they wear these fursuits and they have like a whole fursona for their other kin. I actually looked this up. Very, very weird. The other kin phenomenon started in Lexington, Kentucky.
Really?
Before all the furry stuff, before everything. It was in the 80s, early 80s. It was running out of the University of Kentucky. It was a group of people who mostly identified as elves. They were other kin elves, but there were other kin that came out of this group. And when the internet took off, it started from Lexington, Kentucky.
I think that was my uncle.
Well, there you go. So we're kind of responsible in the domino effect for the whole furry thing phenomenon happening right now.
The furry phenomenon actually started in the 60s.
Okay, well, maybe I don't know
so-
then. I'm just thinking of other kin.
This
but-
is the craziest thing to me is that no one can actually pinpoint when furries started. So it's
It's
kind of one of
Lovecraft.
these things where it's like a myth. Like furries have like this myth
Uh-huh.
where I think they push this narrative that they've existed for a very long time, kind of like homosexuals, but they're finally able to come out of the
This is
closet.
part of my big point. Yeah.
Yeah. They're fucking. So I think they're creating like this massive narrative that like they were around for a lot longer than maybe they were. But it wouldn't make a lot of sense then the 60s and 70s when we started having these strange cartoons pop up that kids are watching with like anthropomorphic animals that in many ways are
Sexy.
Yeah. They're
Yeah,
like
that's true.
sexualizing.
Yeah, I was
these
about to say
animals.
Aesop's fables, but they're not sexy.
Nobody sees fucking like what's that Toad and Frog or
Yeah.
the toad
That's
that wears
probably one of them.
that wears the tweed jacket. Nobody sees that and is like, I want to fuck that. frog. Like nobody thinks that, dude.
But the Bugs Bunny cross dressing with the boobs,
like that's
and,
like some
yeah,
sick shit. Cartoons
Right.
are fucked up.
that makes
dude.
sense.
Yeah.
That actually makes sense.
But
Yeah.
it's more recent than anything that it's being normalized or a push to normalize
that's
it.
really
There was a recent headline that there was a school district, I think in California or in Oregon, where they're having problems with kids answering the questions by barking or meowing, and the teachers weren't allowed to like tell them not to.
So I heard this firsthand from a parent of a local school district whose daughter was in 9th grade, that they had a problem with someone was putting litter boxes in the bathroom and they kept having to get rid of them. And it was becoming this issue. People were getting worried. So yeah, it's a fucking sickness that's spreading like a
Yeah.
cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Corey,
something-
thoughts?
something like 40% of people have toxoplasmosis, which is like spread by animal feces.
I definitely have
It's cat feces.
Yeah, cat feces.
Yeah.
Cat feces. Also food. Certain food can become infected with toxoplasmosis, but about 40% of Westerners have been exposed to it.
Yeah, and I love cats, but I don't want to dress as a cat or anything.
But I think that many of these sort of moral questions can be compared to like toxoplasmosis. Is that it's one of these sort of diseases like furries that the more in contact you are with furry shit,
Like actual shit?
no, like figurative
Oh.
furry shit, the more likely you are to become, I think, infected
With
by
it.
them. But only if you're a susceptible person.
right, you have to be
this.
susceptible.
Yeah,
first.
you have to be like already kind of messed
Well,
up.
I've got a mundane theory that I want to go ahead and
Okay.
say this before y'all hit all these
Yeah.
points.
All right.
So in my 40 years and then just looking in the past, something happened after World War II.
Mhm.
And what happened was the younger generations started to rebel against the older generation's way of life, and always a downward spiral. So you had the beatniks, then you had the hippies burning the brawls, then you had all this shit, the punk rockers. It just gets worse. And there's always a sexualized component to
Mhm.
it, further and further and further. And then, I think this is what happened because my buddy's a big liberal. He's freaked out about this furry thing. Freaked out. He was like, "What was the slippery slope we fell off of?" And I hate to say it, I think I know exactly what it was. I think it was the universal acceptance of homosexuality to get rid of the taboo.
Uh-huh.
That started opening up more taboos.
Yeah,
Like, just
you
be
always
yourself,
need a
be
taboo.
yourself, be
Yeah.
yourself. And I
Yeah.
think with these people in general, and this is going to be offensive to a lot of people, but it's just a fact. I went to high school. I was fairly popular in high school. Right. So I've witnessed what happened to the people that weren't popular in high school.
Mhm.
You would never see someone who was attractive with a decent body be a furry.
Right.
It's always the same. It's just like COVID. The people that wanted to keep the masks
Yeah.
were ugly people.
Yeah.
The people that didn't want to get rid of them were attractive people. It's
Yeah.
the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And with all this degeneracy, it becomes more and more animalistic, more and more and more and more. People want to be weirder than their parents. And then you have these fat, ugly people with no personalities that want to join some kind of hierarchy.
Right.
How are they going to join a hierarchy? They dress up like something else. Then the quality and the whatever, how their suits made, they get to rise in a hierarchy.
Yeah.
So it's just a continual thing. And
So it's a slave morality.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And like, and when I've noticed the people that I grew up with that were nerds then, they often end up in big corporations and
Mhm.
bureaucracies. I got a buddy that's a lobbyist for NRA. Obviously, when you meet the guy, the dude's been cool his whole life. He said he quit. He's like, I had to quit because everyone in DC is a fucking nerd. He's
Yeah.
like, I can't
Yeah.
deal with them. I
And
cannot
Alexander,
deal with them.
you were saying that a lot of the CEOs of the pharmaceuticals
So,
are furries, right?
not CEOs,
Not CEOs.
but a lot of people at work in like a lot of the nerds, a lot of the science.
But the people behind the
va-
vaccine,
Moderna. I was
Moderna,
wrong.
yes.
It wasn't Pfizer. It was Moderna.
Moderna, okay,
Um,
are furries. Some of them.
There, yeah. So
Okay.
there was a big scandal that this furry woman online was
Furris, please.
a fur. Yeah, this fur. I think she was a fox. Is that what I'm supposed? She's a
a
fox lady.
foxona.
A foxona. She was like really big pushing for the vaccine, really to like a violent degree. I think I remember her posting something about how like people who don't vaccinate their kids need to be like locked up and their kids taken away from them. Like she's a crazy bitch. But she was a furry, and I read an article about her. She became a furry because other people at Moderna introduced her into the subculture. So like it kind of is runs
Runs deep,
deeper than I
yeah.
thought. But another thing that I saw a few weeks back was there was a random poster who posted from the interior of a I think an F-16 fighter jet cockpit, and in the cockpit he had a sticker of his fursona. And I go on here, and that's kind of what amazed me, is that someone that's in an elite position, because being a fighter pilot is not a
But they still ugly.
I don't know. I don't
mean,
I don't know.
This is one of Freud's greatest
point
points.
here. They're ugly.
This is one of Freud's greatest points: is that people don't want things; they want to be
Yeah.
envied.
Yeah.
They want to. That's all they care about. So
Yeah.
if you put this costume on, you can now be envied. You can now be like rise up in the hierarchy.
I don't know about by who. But
I think that
by other
well,
furries.
I actually think, to your point about, sort of popularity and stuff, I think it's interesting that the furry suit is a literal mask for these people to hide behind, and to be able to associate their identity not with their actual identity, but with this created thing that they get a lot more control over. And
A lot of them make animated characters too and interact with them online, and the animated characters are always animated very sexily, like you were saying.
So
Yeah.
like I didn't know about this. Is this like it's like a filter?
At least on the communities I'm on.
Okay, the community. Are you in the furry community?
oh god, he's bringing out his fursuit. And I think it's also interesting that they're not, one-to-one, but there does seem to be a lot of overlap with a lot of the people who are in this community are like neurodivergent or autistic in some way. And they're possibly people who are attracted to this because they may have problems, interacting socially, on the same level as other people. And so, yeah, exactly. It's facially as
Their
well.
persona covers
But when
the
you can wear
face.
the mask and you can kind of communicate in a way that's not necessarily the normal verbal way we communicate, that could be attractive to people.
I notice
that as well.
autistic people who are not furries also really like those Facebook or Ghost app, whatever it is.
The like emoji,
well, it's like the animated characters they use to say things.
Bitmoji,
Bitmoji. Like they like having these digital avatars to represent them, so they don't have to do face.
Yeah.
And I think that comes to the deeper point of what's attractive in furries.
I think I've thought about this. Last night I was pondering the sort of like the psychology of a sort of avatar that someone has online, right? And not only online, furries are a good example of this, is that furries innately are sexually depraved. There's there's no getting around it. No matter how much a furry wants to say that they're not sexually depraved, like 75% of their community is devoted to, at least devoted to some sort of like hardcore, weird, sick porn of these cartoon animals, right? Like these people at the very least want to fuck cartoon animals. And I think there's a good contingent of them that want to fuck real animals.
Mm-hmm.
So that just needs to be put out there in case there's any furry listeners. You guys are sick.
And they have sex with each other in the fursuits.
Yeah, they do.
As the animals.
They do.
Yeah.
Like there's a huge, I remember a furry convention a few years ago that I was reading about. And this is the crazy thing. There's conventions, like multi-city. I was there at the furry convention. I was
Just like Fauci in those bathhouses.
Yeah, exactly. I was studying. No, there was a massive breakout of like HIV there, like huge breakout of HIV. I think it was like they had like a swimming pool that got like a small like kiddie swimming pool that they filled like tepid water, and it was like infected by some sort of STD, and so like everyone that went inside this swimming pool got an STD.
That's
and it
so
was
disgusting.
It spread like crazy throughout this entire.
There's only two ways to be like truly an animal, and it's violence or sex.
Yeah.
Like, that's the holes people usually go down to become more like an animal. And so in our society, violence has become such a faux pas that everybody just turns to sex.
Eating too.
Eating too, yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
And I think that the people, the furry people, though, they, there's this. You ever read the Volsung Saga? Okay, in the Volsung Saga, have you read it?
No.
Okay, the Volsung Saga was as a Norse saga, and inside, I'll do like a TLDR to the point I'm trying to get to. Pretty much, there's a guy, his dad dies. He wants to get revenge on his dad dying. He wants to take vengeance for his dad. So he fucks his sister, and his sister like has a kid, but the kid's too weak, so he kills the kid, and he keeps just like impregnating his sister until eventually he comes out with this hyper autistic, like super soldier Germanic beast who is able to like be bitten by snakes and not die, and he's not afraid of anything. And this is his like super weapon that he's going to use to get revenge on this king that killed his dad. Right? Like, what happens though after this, him and his autistic son, they get like these wolf pelts from this witch. They kill this witch and they take, I think it was a witch, take these wolf pelts though. And if they keep the wolf pelt on for short periods of time, they become like pretty much unstoppable in battle. They can kill hundreds. But if they keep it on too long, they begin to become the wolf. They become the beast. So they leave these fursuits on for far too long, and the son and him go on like a rampage for like, I think it was like 7 days. They just go on this rampage and like kill several villages until eventually Volsung is able to actually get the freaking fursuit off and finally like beat the shit out of his autistic son and save him and get the like fursuit off of him. But there's a lesson there. Right? Is that
fathers have to beat their sons to prevent furries.
That's what I got from it.
That's one of them. You wear the fursuit too long, you become the animal, right? Like
it's like the Nietzsche quote.
It's
with the abyss.
Yeah, you stare into the abyss. It's like that exists with like all
Stare into the fursuit.
All sort of digital avatars though, because like all of these people, I think all furries started as a digital avatar. None of them started with the fursuit, right?
A lot start with the foxtail butt plug.
I think I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
where a lot starts. Yeah.
Well, because this was before the internet,
and
right?
they make them that you can clip onto your belt for non-sexual activities, but that's
How
a
is it
really
a butt
common.
plug in the tail? Doesn't the butt plug go inside?
You have a
the
hole
butt
in
plug
your
goes in
pants.
tail, and then you basically
Oh,
have.
that's right. I remember you saying. I was so confused then too.
It's a butt plug with a tail attached, and then you just stick it in.
You explained this to him not on the podcast. Just
I explained it. He came into our restaurant the other day, and I don't think you remember that conversation. Yeah, it's the tail's attached, and they stick it in, and they like to call it like their tail hole.
There, are you done with your explication? Did you want to say anything else, Alexander, on this or
Millions must die.
I have said, we've talked about this before, Alexander, and I have said I really want to see a very brutal like a movie of this story, like kind of like the Northman, and just a very brutal version of this, but that the wolf pelts are like actual like fursona suits. I would love to see that.
like the witch?
I mean,
the witch is like an SJW giving them a
The
fursuit.
moral of the story is that you should have never put on the fursuit to begin with. That's the moral.
So bringing this, actually, this is kind of a good connection because I was wanting to bring this up. That this is where I have a little trouble understanding furries. If the motive is like I want to become bestial, and you see the animals they chew, it's a lot of times wolves or foxes, especially for like women, I think. Very kind of primal, these archetype animals. It's like you look at the wolf and like that's something I think you see in a lot of cultures as, look at like Romulus and Remus. That's such an archetype of the warrior and the beast. But you look at the fursuits and they're very cartoonish, and a lot of their like furry arts and the great art that the furries produce. But you look at that, it's all very cartoonish. It looks like something from a kid's show. And so I wonder, Corey, I kind of want to know your opinion. It's like, where do you get that? Because if it's like a sexualized thing in terms of a beast, then you would think it'd be very bestial, but it's not.
Well,
it's
the
very
easy way to read that is castration complex, because it's basically you have this thing that symbolizes the father who's very strong, masculine, empowering, and you make it cartoonish. You're castrating the father. It's basically like a way of getting rid of authority. That would be an easy reading. I don't know if that's it. But there's also another strand here with the furries that kind of tied to what Alexander was saying with them being connected to Moderna and being behind the vaccination, which is that I notice, and maybe fascist isn't the right word, but there's a totalitarian bent I notice in the politics, whether they're left or right, of a lot of furries. Like they have this on one hand, they have this like anti-authority, like we have to do away with this authority, or making cartoon out of the masculine figure, but this castration thing. But at the same time, it's like only to the ends of replacing it with a new phallus, of replacing it with something that you have to bow down. And I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if their sexual role play ends up following a very dominant versus subversive masculine, feminine figures, but in exaggerated forms, like kind of in Japanese culture. But in either case, right, there's something going on psychosexually in the political ideology of furries that makes it so it's like we have to do away with one authority. They're not merely libertarian in the liberal sense. They're actually extremely authoritarian, usually, as far as I can see.
Well, and yeah, well, I think that's true. But I do. Okay, this is very interesting because you would think that someone like furries would, and that's something that to various degrees is kind of mocked by a lot of people, or seen as very silly. And I think the people who they kind of develop these sort of tight knit communities, online, and
it's nerds in general. They get bullied, and so they do the Silicon Valley thing. It's like, aha, now we actually control all of you, right?
Yeah,
it's the same thing with the furries. They're bullied. They're ugly.
It's interesting that like. You would assume that they would be like, oh, more into the sort of free love and we're oppressed and people don't understand us and all that stuff.
They are.
And yeah, sure. But it's interesting because I know there was a convention, I don't think too far back, and I think this has popped up a few times, of now there's like the alt-right Nazi furries that show up to the conventions in like Nazi furry costumes.
Yeah.
And they like, it pissed a lot of people off because there were the poor people at those hotels watching
their kids,
Nazi
fursuits with Nazi symbols on them. But I'm like, how do you get there? Because you would think that those types of people would be a lot more, at least in theory, more conservative about that.
Yeah, they don't realize when
it's aesthetic. It's
just got an aesthetic at that point.
They're like the first to go when the Nazis come to power.
Yeah, a big thing with these.
They're not the Aryan race. I hope they realize that.
The big thing with a lot of these people. And
there we go.
This extends also to really most like millennial and Gen Z politics is like this, is that it's all resentment politics.
Yeah.
Right. Like these people are ugly nerds. Like these people are ugly, stupid people who have never had power in their life. And so they get off on this sort of, as you were saying, this sort of like domination, sort of replacing the father figure, because these people are extremely powerless, and they gain no respect. And so I think that the fursuit combined with like being in this community that in a sense is like pseudo hierarchical, because like the coolest fursuit, the sort of character politics, I think, of these spheres give way into sort of hierarchy that occurs, and those are the furries that are getting the most tail,
literally
I think the most tail. And so I think that that's why these people are into these extreme politics. It all goes back to really sexual
it's also
adequacy.
Very mythological. It's like, oh, we have these furry clan, and now the Nazi furry clan comes, and they're going to do like some Ragnarok battle in the hotel basement. And it's like they're playing out a mythology in a way. It's almost
blame
religious.
like the map video games, like Hearts of Iron.
Oh, okay. For the Nazi aesthetic
and the communists, like furries, and really all the political furries in general. I blame these video games that are like historical video games made for autistic people.
But it's interesting because I bet you these people, but even before their personas, they have these fantasies of having these political battles, right? Or you see this a lot with people on the right, like the Day of the Rope, or Siege or whatever. But it's like they fantasize about these battles, and then they sort of act it out when they put on the mask. It's a very religious ritual type of behavior.
Corey, that's where Warrior Cats actually ties in.
Well,
because that's a lot of people who become furries. That's a lot of their first exposure, and it's a series of books that pretty much.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay,
and it's something you read like when you're in that stage of going through puberty, and there are these cats that are kind of basically humans, and there's romance, but a lot of it is battles between these cats. It's kind of a war. There's the bad cats that take over and stuff. That is genuinely where a lot of the furries start. And I actually met a furry this summer who was obsessed with warrior cats.
It reminds me of that quote by was it Harold Bloom, who said he was asked, "Would you rather your kid read Stephen King or J.K. Rowling?" He said, "I'd rather him not read."
That's a good answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I think I'm trying to see how I want to say this. It's like I don't want to come in like full defense of furries here. But I do want to show some sympathy to what I'm sure are many furry fans. And in that, I think it's true that I don't think it's psychologically healthy. I do think it comes birthed out of a lot of what we're saying. You know, a lot of people who feel oppressed, who kind of have sucky lives, who have not really been able to prove themselves in this life in a lot of ways. And so they kind of get this other kin, this mask. I think all that's very true. But I think there's probably, I'm sure, a number of people who are in a lot of ways seemingly functionally somewhat normal, who kind of fall into this stuff and start to get driven towards, maybe it's a sexual thing, you know, maybe it's a community thing, but I feel like there probably are at least a good number of people who are, you know, you'd meet them, they're not the kind of people you're talking about. They might be psychologically kind of there, and they may not be going all the way, by the way, of actually buying a $2,000 fursuit, but maybe they're looking at the stuff online. And I don't know. I mean, I wonder, I don't know if it's always as extreme
like
as
Playboy bunnies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, that's actually a good point. I mean, the Playboy bunnies, the little kind of like cat girl costumes, the sexy slutty cats, you know what I'm talking about, I hope.
Where they don't have a full developed persona.
Yeah, but it's like there's something there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or even if it's like, oh yeah, I wouldn't go to a convention or I wouldn't buy a costume, but like there's something about the porn or something that turns you on. Like I'm sure there's a lot of people who are more or less normal that like fall into that.
Yeah,
and maybe
I wouldn't say they're normal, but I see what you're saying. They're perverts whose perversion is actually not in furries. They just get off to how weird the furry thing is.
Yeah, maybe that.
There's
you know?
that, but like, would that person really be a furry?
Or just maybe that's a good point. Maybe they're not in
I imagine a lot of like old swingers probably wind up in furry
like
conventions
it
for
may
that
not be like
reason.
this like this all the unconscious stuff with the nerd and but maybe it's just that this is something taboo and weird, and because it's taboo, it's now sexy. Yeah.
They probably don't stay there very long.
Yeah.
I think this all comes down. Corey and I were talking about this Nietzsche's book, The Genealogy of Morals.
Yep.
The one word he says in that book over and over and over again in terms of slave morality is resentment.
Yep.
Like I think it all comes down to resentment of society, resentment of the hierarchies, resentment of them not being higher in the hierarchies, resentment of people have taught them, being unable to forgive is what Nietzsche talks about also with the slaves. They can't forgive. I think it all comes out of that kind of just but their youth, like being rejected as a youth and just trying to find at some point, like it's like that goal. I always want to be envied. So what can I do to get envied?
Yeah. And what's scary is that it's not pure nihilism. It's not this let's get rid of authority thing. It always strikes me as let's get rid of authority to replace it with our authority. Whether that be, you know, pharmaceutical monopoly lands, you know, capitalism, corporatism, or where Moderna rules everything and Amazon determines when you eat and sleep. You know, that's like the leftist totalitarian system. And then there's the right Nazi LARPer totalitarian furries who I don't even know what they want if they come into power. But, you know, it's never just like, oh, let's get rid of authority.
What's their vision? What are they, what's their end goal here? Like,
I think it's easy to understand. Like, we talk about authoritarianism. It's like the patriarchy, right? In a true patriarchy, the husband's not beating the wife.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not how that works. That's someone who feels like they have no power, so they beat their wife. Same thing with these people. These people have no power, and once they get power, they're not going to let go of that power.
Mm-hmm.
They can't live in the flux of power like someone who's comfortable in that position. Like you don't see, you know, a generally normal person, good-looking guy vying for authoritarian power. It's always this type of lesser than
Pol Pot ugly guy.
Yeah, exactly. It's always just somebody lesser than
Jim Moon. What's his name? Korean dude, North Korean.
Kim Jong-un.
Kim Jong-un. Thank you. Yeah. Are there any pretty aesthetically pleasing fascist leaders? I mean, Hitler's kind of pretty. He was. Yeah, I'd say so. I can't think of any others.
Stalin was.
Mussolini looked like Joe Rogan if you call it.
Yeah, 100%.
You think Mussolini?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that like
the leftist totalitarian ones are definitely always ugly. Maybe Stalin being the
Yeah, I was
exception.
gonna say, Stalin was, like, pretty good looking.
Stalin. But he was
He's
pretty
also 5'7".
conservative.
Yeah, no,
Actually.
he's shorter. He's 5'4".
Yeah, well,
He's a
there's
very
that.
very
Yeah.
tiny man.
Stalin was socially pretty conservative, though, is the thing.
Yeah.
He's Stalin.
Okay, anyway.
Yeah, I don't think there's any like.
Well, I have a question
Now
I
Lena's
wanna
mad at our
ask
podcast again.
About the diapers.
Yeah,
This is really been fucking me up, man.
Okay, yeah. But
What is the
even
diaper exactly? Do they eat the diaper or what's
No,
going on?
well,
here?
I think these. What's that?
We need to rewind.
So the diaper thing. Let me educate you. There are people who are. They basically get off to it's. I think it usually goes one or two ways. They either just have a weird thing about diapers, where they like to like wear them and maybe use them, and that's just it. Or they're in and I think it's like a humiliation thing. Or there are people who go like further and they like want to be like
A child.
a child, like a baby, and they
Yeah.
like dress up as babies, and they have like a caretaker who like takes care of them. And I mean, often I think it'll just take place in a, as a sexual thing to get off to. But like even that, I'm saying is as disgusting as that is, I'm like I can understand the psychology of that fetish a lot better than I can the furry fetish.
We had a famous
Just-
explication member who was a famous conservative pundit, and they discovered his diaper thing, and he got kicked out.
Yeah.
But
But,
he
like,
had this. He had this.
It's like,
he would dress
okay,
in
like
diapers.
it's disgusting, but it's like, oh, okay, it's wanting to be infantilized and humiliated. I get that. I get the psychology of that. Furries are like, there's so much more levels of weirdness going on, even if it's like not on the surface as seemingly weird. I mean,
No,
pick
I
your
mean,
poison, but
I think there's a lot of crossover between.
yeah, there are the diaper furries, and that is its own
exactly.
interesting
It's just what
category.
items around when the fixation happens. Is it something furry like mom's shoes, or is it like the diaper? That's Freud's idea.
Yeah.
Basically, the fetish comes from when you fix it when you're like 3 or 4 and you're
Yeah.
looking at your mom naked. What's the closest thing to her? Is it something furry with a purse? Because a lot of people have a fur fetish, not furry, but like they want to like be around fur when they're having sex.
Yeah.
Right? Freud observed this in a lot of his patients. Or it's like they have a foot fetish, very common. And Freud's like, why is the foot fetish so common? Because when most people see their mother naked, the closest thing to her are her shoes. So they associate the feet with a sexual gratification.
I can always tell though when I meet a person if they're going to be a foot person or not.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. Same.
Go around the room.
Yeah, go around the
I'm
room
not
here.
doing-
Who?
I'm not getting into this further, but I'm saying like usually there's a type that usually it's pretty straightforward as to it's just one of those things. But with the diapers, those people just need to have kids.
You think it would fix it?
Oh, I think that would
Fuck
fix it.
yeah, the
Yeah.
diapers are
No,
absolutely
One
no,
would
no.
hope.
disgusting.
Did you not
Shit
see
come-
that? Did you not see that Reddit post? The woman who left her husband because he was like sniffing the baby's diapers.
Yeah. These people,
You
are
know
sick,
it, yeah.
dude. These people should not have kids.
I think I'm way too heteronormative for this conversation.
I wonder if that's even a diaper fetish. That might just be like a shit fetish.
No, these
No,
people
yeah.
are like sick.
She
dude.
said she would notice him like he would bury them in the backyard, and then in the
What?
middle of the
What?
night go out when he thought she was asleep, dig them up, and just like stand there for hours just smelling them.
What?
Well, that's another level.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
crazy. Is that even real?
I feel like that's a different. There's got to be something. I mean,
Why-
there's going to be
why
overlap.
is he
I think it's
burying it?
different.
Why is he burying it? Just he's hiding them.
That's
So he's
weird.
burying
What
them?
the fuck is
Okay,
going
so
on?
I think it's easy. I think it's easy for us to sit here, and go on about this. I want to have some sort of like some sort of happy
You want-
positive ending, like for our furry fans who are listening to this in distress.
There is no hope.
Like
There is no hope.
I don't think that's true. Like Corey,
There is
if you
no
were
hope.
to our cats, our
No, that's a furry.
it's oh god, if our
If a furry came into psychoanalysis,
if a furry came into psychoanalysis, what would you say?
it
You
would,
wouldn't just say
it
you're a
would
piece of
depend
shit.
so much on. No, I wouldn't. But it would depend on where they are. Some furries might already think they're a piece of shit, right? So I don't know. I'd have to get an idea of where they are in their self-awareness first before I do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to answer that question because
Yeah.
it so depends on the person. But
You know what Gurdjieff would do?
what?
100%. I know exactly what he would do. He would give him a shovel. And he would tell him to dig a 12 by 12 foot hole in the backyard. Then he'd tell him to fill it. The next day, he'd tell him to do it again. He would do that for like 2 weeks. And he said he would break people who haven't suffered enough in life to give them some
Yeah.
meaning before they started this journey.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what he would do.
That's
It'd
interesting.
Probably fix it. Definitely. Probably like put him in isolation.
Isolation with LSD.
Yeah, well, like I don't know, do something like put him in a straitjacket and inject him like 500 milligrams of testosterone enanthate like for a week.
I just think
they can't jerk off anymore, right? They're going fucking insane, trapped inside like a padded cell. And I think eventually they're going to just be like, you know what? I don't want to be a fur anymore. Just let me out. I'll be a normal person. I'll have normal sex. Just let me out, please.
I just think they need to suffer some, find some meaning, and be okay with who they really are. I don't know. I mean, how else do you do that through suffering? Suffering's the only way I know. Definitely not through pleasure.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because you were saying that in the last podcast with the monastery stuff.
Yeah.
The path of the pleasure.
Well, but even with the path of the pleasure, there is an other side to that. So that was kind of my point. I guess I didn't articulate it well enough, but pleasure can the most growth you get from pleasure is not from the pleasure; it's from the pain that comes after the pleasure. Because
I see. Yeah,
it's like a mirror. Like as good as you're going to feel that much worse. And that was always the thing for me. Was always the regret.
Yes,
the self-hating.
Yes,
and it's, for me, that's just as important or more important than the actual pleasure.
The sacrifices to Dionysus always come after the gifts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I guess didn't say that well enough. But yeah, that's because I've never had a wild night and gotten fucked up and not been just self-hating.
And the regret is where you have introspection too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's why I don't regret my heroin experience because I mean, it was pleasurable. It was amazing. And then it was absolute fucking hell. And that's where all the growth happens. You know?
Right.
Yeah. So,
how much time do we have left, Calvin?
We're about at the end.
About
actually, I just looked at that. So, any closing remarks?
I just want to say for anyone that may be offended, I'm the most heteronormal person you've ever seen. So I don't understand anything that it isn't, maybe slightly above missionary position in a heterosexual relationship. So if I've offended anyone, just understand that I'm born in the wrong time frame.
Anyone else?
I just want to let all of our very many furry fans know that there is hope, and I don't want to be too dour. There's we are all fallen.
There is hope through death.
Yes. Well, okay. I guess that works.
Walk away while you still can.
Corey?
For those tempted, walk away.
Yeah.
Walk away.
Yeah, walk
Just
away.
walk away.
Delete the photos.
Delete the photos.
delete the
Destroy the
furry
hard
photos.
drive.
Destroy the hard drive.
Like get off the computer
Before it's
I'm
too
not
late.
I'm not the type of person. I hate this sort of like old person rhetoric of get off the damn computer, it'd be good for you. Certain people need to get off the.
That's 100% accurate.
That could be,
I'm trying to move my kids to the woods with no internet access.
That's a good
Internet has
idea.
never done anything good to anyone.
That's a good idea. I'm talking already about the computer heads though. You're like, these people are wired in. It's like some people that are wired in too much, like there's almost no changing them. Like you might as well just stay wired in and like go deeper into the digital like rabbit hole. But furries, I don't like recommending to many people to go outside because I think that it's a cheap cop out for solving an issue. Because I think that a lot of people that are told to go outside have actual real issues that they're just trying to actually like utilize online for
what
help.
would somebody like that tell them to climb a fucking mountain?
Yeah, no, like
go outside, do something difficult.
Yeah, they need to do something difficult, right?
I guess dig a hole.
Dig a hole.
Their suffering is because of a lack of suffering. It's weird. Like you said, like they need to actually suffer real suffering instead of just, sitting here and jerking off to animals.
All right. Well, on that note,
stop it.
Until next time, thank you for joining us on the 50-minute hour. Goodbye.